We're doing something a little different with our phone reviews. Usually I'll make a first impressions video and then write 4,000 words on yourtechreport.com for the final review. I'm still doing the 4,000 word review on Your Tech Report, but I also wanted to do a quick little video wrap up of my time using the HTC One. One of the most exciting things about a phone like this is simply the fact that we're watching a company like HTC, which has been in the smartphone business for as long as I've been interested in smartphones, finally start to steer their massive ship into a new direction. The One X was a step in the right direction, but unfortunately it was still plagued by being a carrier exclusive on Sprint as the HTC Evo 4G LTE something blah blah blah. And now HTC has joined the likes of companies like Samsung and Apple where their branding stays intact. In terms of build and design, I still do think that the HTC One is probably the most attractive phone on the market at the time this video was shot. The Galaxy S4 is a very nice phone, but it feels like a subtle refinement of the Galaxy S3. And ditto the iPhone. Well, even though the iPhone 5 uses a different shell than the iPhone 4S, it's still striking how often those phones can be confused for each other, especially as most people use their iPhones with some kind of case or bumper on them. HTC's design is simple and striking, and if they're borrowing any aesthetics, they're most likely looking at companies like Nokia. And I'm vain enough to admit that when I spend a lot of money on a device like this, I do kind of want people to be impressed by it. It reminds me of my early days with the Lumia 920 as people were trying to figure out if that was some kind of case or if that was actually the phone. And putting the phone in their hands, there's always a reaction to the clarity of the screen and these front-facing speakers. They all want to hear audio off of those speakers, and they're almost always really impressed.
Hey, I mean, praying's for church, huh? Come on.
I haven't seen you in church lately.
Well, there's not much sense in my going to church. Do you remember one time when we were small, we were out here? It was from right over there. I jumped out at you from behind the tree, and Grandpa got all excited, and he shook his fist at me, and he said, "Boy, you be damned to hell."
In terms of cool tricks, boom sound is a fantastic feature to show off to other people, and it's one of those things where it almost makes people angry that it took a company this long to figure out speakers should point at your face. It's kind of a funny arrangement, and people hold the phone and it's longer than it should be. For having a smaller screen than the Galaxy S4, it's almost exactly the same height as the Galaxy S4 to include these awesome speakers. But once they do use it and they realize, oh, well, why weren't we always doing this? That's fantastic. That's exactly what I would want to see. I also can't tell you how happy I am to see IR blasters return. I can't understand a market where people are paying $300 for high-end universal remotes. But at least now we've got that functionality built into our phone with a couple neat tricks where the app which manages the hardware so that you can turn on your TV, turn up your stereo, stuff like that, will also help you keep track of TV shows that you like to watch. So with a single button push in the app, it'll make sure that you're set up to watch a TV show. It'll also add calendar alerts if you want it to remind you when your favorite shows are going to be on. It almost sort of starts to bring some of the functionality of a DVR into your phone, and it becomes a really interesting front end for how you can consume media. It's not all roses, however, when it comes to the build and design, because this is one of the most terrifying phones I've ever used out in public. I am genuinely afraid of dropping it or scratching it or bumping it, and I just want to keep it in a garage and just wipe it with a diaper all day. That's a bad joke from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Knowing that there isn't an easy way to replace screen components, knowing that the casing can be dented because it's aluminum, and aluminum's a fairly soft metal, and knowing that these front plates for the speaker vents are glued onto the phone, and if the phone were to take a corner drop, that it would most likely pop these off or dent the frame so that they wouldn't lie flush anymore. Anytime I think that this might be out in some challenging environment, I have it in some kind of bumper case. Last notes on build and hardware. I'm still not really a big fan of HTC's button arrangement. For phones that put their power button on the top edge, usually it's on this side of the screen, and on the HTC One, it's on the opposite side of the screen. So there's a lot of muscle memory involved in sliding the phone up to try and hit power and then remembering that it's on the opposite side. And with a phone that's sleek and a little slick, and you're doing that dance of of sliding a finger up to the top of the screen, even though that's not normally how you'd hold the phone, it kind of means we'll be increasing the likelihood of a drop at some point in the phone's life. And I'm just spoiled by phones that keep the power button on the right-hand side of the phone where a thumb or a finger would be able to activate it. Like, I really love the power button being lower on the Lumia 920 under the volume rocker, because it's a very natural place where if the phone is cradled in the palm of your hand, your thumb can just naturally hit it. Also, I'm not sold on HTC's 2-button layout. Really, I miss the days when Android phones had 4 buttons. I miss having a dedicated menu key, and I really miss having a dedicated search key. It drives me crazy how every single app will put menu and search in completely different places. Even Google apps, menu and search will end up in different places. And on apps like Facebook, where there isn't a dedicated menu key, then we get that ugly black bar down at the bottom of the phone, which just has to pop up with those 3 little dots, and it completely wastes screen. But it's ugly, and it's a bummer, and it breaks the rest of Android's visual UI and aesthetic. Also, it means that we're overworking the home key. So now hitting home once brings up home. Double tapping home brings up your recently used apps, and holding long pressing on home will bring up Google Now for a search. That would be fine, but even with the recent update which helped improve the capacitive button sensitivity, double tapping is not a consistently activated activity on a capacitive button. And very, very rarely, especially if I'm trying to do it with a thumb, I'll hit once and then hit a little higher than I meant to or a little lower than I meant to, and it just takes me home. And so double tapping becomes a very inconsistent affair, and that's not what you want on a phone that's built for multitasking. In terms of software, I actually really do like Sense, but Sense commits one very egregious sin that made me get rid of it. And that was, in Sense, you aren't able to customize what order your home screens go in, specifically blink feed. Your blink feed home screen will always be on the left-hand side of your home screens, and I would want blink feed to be in the middle. And because of that, I ended up dumping HTC Sense for, this is Nova Launcher. Yes, Nova Launcher Prime that I'm using right now on the phone. Woof, I completely forgot what my launcher was. That being said, I still really like all of the additions that come with the HTC edition of the HTC One. I'm actually going to say that I wouldn't recommend people go out and get the developer edition, the Google edition, the Nexus-ified HTC One, because a lot of the benefits that come with this phone come with that software. Things like camera clarity. There are a lot of settings that are built into the HTC camera app that you won't have access to using the stock Google camera app. And it really does reduce the quality of the photos and the output that you can get on this camera module. Performance has been outstanding. This new Qualcomm 600 is just a beast of a chipset, and I've enjoyed it on the LG Optimus G and the 2 Galaxy S4s that we've been playing with in-house. I have to say, I've been impressed. This is the first phone that I've ever played with which has a power save mode, which does actually seem to save me some battery life. I do seem to get longer runtime with the HTC One than I do with the Samsung. And I really do think that the CPU throttling in the power saver on the HTC One is responsible for that. When you deactivate power saver, this phone gets really hot. And that's a little worrying considering you can't do things like replace the battery. Heat kills our electronics, so over time, I would worry that not running battery saver when you don't need the extra horsepower might subtly reduce battery life when we're talking long term, especially over the life of a 2-year contract. And the Qualcomm 600 series chipset seems to do a pretty good job of offloading certain jobs to the GPU when you don't need to run the CPU. We don't do a lot of battery benchmarking. It's kind of hard to get a sense of what's actually going to be meaningful to your day-to-day activities. Like a light day for me might be a really heavy day for you in terms of usage. But we did find that in streaming Netflix with everything but Wi-Fi turned off and keeping the screen at 100% brightness, you're going to lose about 20 to 23% of your battery for every hour of streaming video that you watch. And for a big, bright 1080p screen and really, really fast internals, that's actually not bad battery usage. On the whole, it made it through an entire day of activity for me, and I keep multiple email accounts syncing in real time. I keep my social networking syncing in real time. So I've been pretty impressed. This has gotten me through days much easier than the HTC One X ever did. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the camera because I have several videos comparing the HTC One to the Lumia 920 and to the Galaxy S4, but I'll just reiterate it, and I'll say it loud and proud one more time, that this is the best camera on an Android handset on the market. The The Galaxy S4 camera is very good, and I'm not taking anything away from Samsung. That is an incredible high-resolution image sensor. But for most of the way that we interact with photos, for all of us who upload to services like Google+, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where our photos are going to get resized, for those of us who don't print out photos from our phones but like to share them online or in the cloud, having the slightly lower resolution ultra pixel camera with better low light sensitivity, to me, is a bigger advantage than having the Galaxy S4's higher resolution image sensor, coupled with the fact that I just like the wider angle lens on the HTC One. You get more scene in your shot. It's like a proper widescreen. It feels a little bit bigger. It feels a little bit more grand. Not to mention optical image stabilization, which tremendously improves handheld stills in low light and the clarity of video by smoothing out all of your hand movements. This to me is a clear winner for almost all of the shooting that I do on smartphones. The HTC One is one of the phones that I'll pick up before any other, and the only phone that competes with it, in my opinion, is the Lumia 920. HTC has done a very good job of incorporating these bands into the casing on the One, and these sides, which are also plastic, to help reduce any interference with the wireless radios. Though I still find that there are moments where attenuation happens faster than on some of the plastic-bodied phones that I'll play with. When compared directly with the Galaxy S4, this will lose Wi-Fi subtly faster than the plastic GS4. It also seems to lose GPS when it's under my car stereo in a cup holder. When it doesn't have a clear view of the sky, it tends to lose line of sight with GPS satellites just a little bit sooner than the Galaxy S4 might. What's funny is that it seems to be comparable with the Galaxy S4 Active, which does have a metallic shell wrapping around the back. So I think we're just running into the limitations of when most of your phone is made out of metal, it will cause a slight degradation to the sensitivity of the radios on board. And in terms of hardware issues, if you want to get really nitpicky, just from a design and aesthetic standpoint, it really does bother me that the headphone jack cuts into the bottom edge of the aluminum and that it's not centered in between the two aluminum sides. Like, it just looks so uneven, and it looks unfinished. It looks like there's supposed to be something else there, that the headphone jack was supposed to be moved up just a fraction of a millimeter or something. It drives me crazy every time I look at it. And so even though the battery life is pretty good, I still did run into one semi-serious issue regarding the non-removable nature of this battery when I went to run the update, which had recently come out for the AT&T version of the HTC One. My phone bricked halfway through running the update. And so it's connected to my computer, and the computer is giving you this helpful, how to reset your phone. And the advice that HTC gives for resetting the HTC One is to remove the back cover of the phone and to remove the battery for a certain amount of time, and then replace the battery and have the phone boot up again to restart the update. I facepalmed pretty hard when that happened, because it's not even like this is their first phone with a non-removable battery. So someone at HTC, when you're writing the helpful guides in your software updates, you might want to take a look at what steps are needed to reset a phone which you can't remove the battery from. Just a helpful word of advice, because it makes you look foolish. So folks, it's all about experience. If you have to pin me down as a gadget blogger and ask me what phone is the best phone, I'm not going to be able to answer that question, but I will be able to tell you that the HTC One is my favorite phone of this generation. I like it better than the Galaxy S4, I like it better than the LG Optimus G Pro, but it's not a decisive victory. For every one of those devices, there are compromises, and you just have to decide what compromises you're willing to live with. I'm willing to live with a slightly more fragile phone, a phone that I'm more afraid of dropping, and a phone without a removable battery and with built-in storage that can't be upgraded for the improved audio and the better camera experience. A lot of people, and rightfully so, aren't going to want to make that compromise. And every bullet point for bullet point happens to come down to that kind of argument. Do you want more stuff in TouchWiz in terms of software, or do you want the leaner, slightly more clean experience of HTC Sense? And this conversation starts to get much more difficult when you start factoring in phones like the Galaxy S4 Active. So now, because I'm a fairly active guy and I like to go outside hiking and I like to work on film sets and, occasionally I like to go to the beach, Well, now here's a phone that's perfectly adapted to environments which are a little bit more rugged and moist, and will certainly survive much better than the HTC One might for minor drops and for water damage. So really the only appropriate answer I can give is you should just buy all the phones. Like a bad game of Pokemon. But no, seriously, folks, I really have enjoyed using the HTC One for the last couple months. I'm still not sold on exactly what phone I will actually pay my own money to own, but the HTC One right now is at the top of my list. You can catch my full written review of the HTC One on yourtechreport.com. It's around 3,900 words long, and it has embedded some of the videos that I've mentioned here for the camera and the speaker test, so you can definitely go check that out. And we'll be wrapping up the Galaxy S4 soon, and I am getting ready to shoot a similar wrap-up on the LG Optimus G Pro, so we can talk a little phablet for those of you who want a larger screened experience as well. As always, folks, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next review.